Now, we're still waiting on a decision that could impact the evidence we see during Bryan Kohberger's upcoming trial. He's accused of stabbing 4 University of Idaho students to death in 2022 in Moscow. While in court today in Ada County, his attorneys continuing to accuse law enforcement of violating Kohberger's constitutional rights to tie him to the quadruple murder. Dakota Cascade's Didier explains.
Investigative genetic genealogy. It's a technique employed by law enforcement and forensics investigators when found DNA doesn't match any results through law enforcement databases, as was the case when police found touch or trace DNA on the sheath of a knife that was found at the scene of the murders in Moscow. Employing IgG, investigators look at the variations within the DNA sample acquired and create an SNP or SNP, which are then uploaded to private databases, commonly ancestry services. In court on Friday, Kohberger's defense arguing that the dissemination of that SNP from law enforcement to private DNA databases violated Bryan Kohberger's privacy rights, as no legal warrant was obtained to do so, and could have violated the FBI's interim policy on genetic genealogy practices. The argument stands in contrast to an American legal doctrine known as third-party doctrine, which states people who voluntarily give information to a third party, such as in the case of the ancestry service websites, have no reasonable expectation of privacy, which the defense appears to be challenging.
The tricky thing is what's called the third-party doctrine, right? So if I have a gum wrapper in my pocket and I throw it in the trash can when I leave today, I've said, this is my thing, you can't have it. But then the second I throw it in the trash, I don't care who gets it, right? That's the decision the Supreme Court's made. That's outside my reasonable expectation of privacy. Now, if I make a phone call, I might have more of an expectation of privacy in who I'm calling and what I'm saying, because I expect that to be hidden, to be confidential. There's a tricky thing here where the court has to kind of weigh whether this genetic testing is within that phone call or within the trash can.
The prosecution responding by pointing out that Kohberger has never asserted he provided his own DNA to a genealogy site and then had it misused, nor does he have any right to privacy for DNA left at a crime scene. Multiple points of contention were brought up by the defense regarding the handling of DNA and Kohberger's evidence file by law enforcement, as Corporal Brett Payne, the lead detective on the case for the Moscow Police Department, was called as a witness. All of these deliberations based around the defense's desire to see a Franks hearing, where the court could examine whether or not DNA in the case was handled with proper warrants.
Anytime you're dealing with a search warrant of any sort, that search warrant has to be based off of some verifiable data. They take those to the court and they say, Judge, I want to search this thing because I believe, based off these facts, there's evidence there that's helpful to us. Now, Frank's hearing is where you're telling the judge, look, the police either lied in what they put in that search warrant, or they recklessly withheld some truth or some evidence that they had. They didn't tell the judge about it. And in order to get a Franks hearing, the defendant actually has to prove, to some extent, they have to show substantial evidence that they've got some proof that that happened.
Judge Stephen Hippler closing the 2-day hearing early Friday afternoon, saying that he would need to do further research before ruling on whether or not there would be a Franks hearing based on what was presented, saying he would issue his decision in writing at a later date. Kohberger pleaded not guilty to the murders of Madison Mogan, Kaylee Gonsalves, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. If convicted, he could face the death penalty. His trial is scheduled for August.
Dakota Cascade's Didier there reporting. A Boise school